Okay, get the audio running, bring up the display here, and we're live, I think. I should probably confirm that. Yes, it is confirmed. Okay, so, very late start tonight. Hour and a half late. Very tardy. I could give you my excuses. Suffice to say, I've been trying to pull some things together. I've got a, I don't know if I would want to call it a show, but I'll be putting a bunch of my work in some cases at the local college here. And just all of the necessity to finish everything up and present it in its best light. It's a good push. It's pushing me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. So that has been occupying a lot of my time lately, and is the reason that I am late tonight. I really am not really thinking of much here as I'm playing with this. I'm not really trying to construct anything. I started playing with this gray, which is really coming out. I mean, it's a little almost blue, but with this bright blue behind it, it almost comes out, appears to be pink. So looking at the chat, Manny says we're live. Good to know. So, Manny suggested a topic for tonight. The topic being imposter syndrome. And I'm tempted to say that I'm not qualified to talk about that. You know, because I would feel like an imposter. Okay, alright. Okay. Hopefully that's the only dad joke for tonight. But, no, actually, I definitely get that feeling quite a bit. And so for anyone who's kind of new to the term, imposter syndrome is basically that feeling that you are the odd man out, that just will be a matter of time until everyone else figures out that you're a fake, and that you don't really know what you're doing. That you're the imposter. And I don't know. I have some thoughts on this. Like, this is something I definitely experience from time to time. Like, I think part of it is a new place, a new kind of hierarchy of who's who, but then also how things work, right? So, like, I think it's kind of the nature of art that as you go to different places, we're all kind of working on building something ideally that will be that will kind of push things farther along. I mean, you can work within a space, you can work within a genre, and be kind of a faithful representative of that style or genre. But I think generally artists are trying to explore new territory, see new things happen, or express or present things in an interesting way. And so I think by nature, there's always something to learn about what we're doing, how to do it, and then different groups, whether it's a studio or a school or whatever, are going to approach those problems in different ways. So every time you go somewhere new, a new environment, new team, there's I think that legitimate feeling of, okay, I've got to get the lay of the land. I need to figure out, kind of get my bearings, right? And so I think imposter syndrome is partly that. I think it's partly experience and comfort. Like, are you working in a medium or in a way that you're comfortable with? Do the results, are they predictable, right? And to that end, to kind of tie those two ideas together, so put this up here. What did I say first? This was the kind of the culture or the atmosphere, right? And up here, I'm just going to write just like the map. You kind of need a map of like what you're seeing. And then the other thing is, what do we say? So that's kind of one area. And then you've got comfort and experience. And with that, I might say the bridge between these two is predictability. So I think that there can be some fear around if something is unpredictable, then the fear is that something unknown, new territory, new experiences, something uncomfortable, something you've never experienced, will pop up, and you'll be expected to know that. I mean, that's what I feel like with imposter syndrome. Is like someone's going to ask me a question, and I'm going to be like, I don't know, no idea, And so I think this. I can't help but think about that analogy that I keep kind of circling back around to, that like art, at least the industry, doing it as a profession, is kind of like a landscape, a map. There's like a city, and in that city there's, let's draw it out here. So in that city you've got buildings. This is like a gross planet, world here. These are these little buildings on the surface. Okay, so over here you might have, I don't know, this is like film. Okay, and then over here, maybe adjacent to it, is like, I don't know, anime or something. And then like over here, I don't know, maybe you got, I don't know, let's do the big one over here. We'll do video games. Within games, we're going to have, a bunch of little sub-communities, right? You have like 3D, then you'll have like, I don't know, illustration. Don't feel like finishing out the word. Animation. And maybe that's maybe that's a town in between these two places. You got anime, you got film, you got video games, and maybe there's a town in the middle called Animation Town, right? Animationville. Okay. All right. So anyway, Video Game City. So anyway, between these, you have these roads, right? And so, like, if you want to learn illustration, you're going to have to go on the road of probably rendering, right? Probably want to know something about anatomy. So that might be another road on the way. And that road might also lead to Animationville, right? All the way over to Anime Town, right? You'll have to know something about composition, right? So that'll be over here. So there's all these streets you'll have to take. And there are correlations that kind of relate between them. Okay, so anyway, if you have a known path, you say, I know how to get from point A to point B. So I can make animations for games, or I can make animations for film. And you know how all these different roads you got to take, or illustration, because that's the one that I know. So I know I've got to know rendering and anatomy, composition, and that's going to get me from one place to another. Then that's predictable. But what about when you're like out here in like exploration land? You know, just exploring the unknown. I mean, I think the best thing is if you actually know that you're in unknown territory for yourself. And you may actually stumble upon a city and find out, oh yeah, there's actually something over here. You know, it's called fine art. I don't know, or something else. Fine artsyville. All right. But when you're out in the unknown, there's no defined path that says you're doing it right, right? There's nothing. There's no validation. There's no signposts. There's no paid necessarily paid gigs that explain or that rather are very well defined. Like I will pay you X amount because that's the going rate to produce a sheet of concept sketches or to do a however long animation, right? Because those things are over time they kind of develop. You know the paths, you know how to get there, and so they become just well trodden, well understood. But out here, you have no idea, whether you're doing the right thing or not. And then maybe, I don't know if this is a example that's really, touching hitting the right chords there to be understood in terms of imposter syndrome. But I do think that's a big part of it. Is like if you knew where you were on the map and you knew everywhere you needed to go and you felt very comfortable about it, then you probably wouldn't feel that imposter syndrome. But I think it's the nature of what we're doing that it is so complex. There's so many places you can go, so many different connections. Like, oh, I've never been down that avenue. I don't know where it goes, right? And I would use this idea of this map, partly to talk about shortcuts. That like if you are taught, like, okay, well, if this is kind of how I feel with 3D right now. If I do, X, Y, and Z, then I can get from, illustration to 3D, and I'm like cutting through all these different, back alleys and stuff, and I have no idea about the rest of the map, everything, all the other avenues and stuff that goes around it. I just know that if I take these little side streets and stuff, I can end up there. But if I get off of that and I need to figure something else out, I end up over here. I don't know where I am. I don't know how. I didn't know I have to get on the beltway and loop back around or whatever. Okay, analogy is only so robust, but yeah, I think that is a part of understanding something well, understanding something thoroughly, and so that's in that comfort experience area. Let's keep kind of noodling with this and see if we come up with anything interesting visually. Yeah, imposter syndrome. So I think what's kind of interesting about that is I really don't want to say that nobody knows. I don't want to say that, like, oh, well, it's all just, we're all flying by the seat of our pants and you make it up and whatever. But I do think it's probably may also be a part of our culture and our upbringing, and talked about comfort, confidence, I guess. Experience gives confidence. That you're kind of looking to, like, who are the adults in the room, like who are the people, who are the masters, the people that know, and I think part of that's a social requirement, like it's a built-in thing where we are looking for, like who's number one, who's the boss here, it's like you enter a room or you enter a new business or something, and you're trying to figure out, like, how do things work, and I talked about that with the culture in a new place. But specifically, I mean, kind of the human nature of sizing people up and, again, this map, trying to figure out, where am I, where do things fit, what connects to what. And I think with that, we need simplicity. We just want to know, like, am I good? Am I right? Have I got it? Got what it takes, or not? Am I in or am I out? And it's uncomfortable to think that there's, like, this whole spectrum of offerings that you bring, and weaknesses that you have that perhaps need to be shored up, or accounted for. And to a degree, I think there's perhaps a comfort level with not knowing that is necessary, or a comfort level with accepting your approach to things and realizing that other people have a completely different way of doing it. And that's actually, that's something that I still am trying to figure out for myself. I think that I lean much more that way than I ever did. I would definitely say that for a long time, I looked at other people's work and would think, like, well, how do they do that? And if I could figure it out, like if I knew what they were doing, then it was almost like it didn't matter. Like, oh yeah, well, sure, they did that, but, like, I know how they're doing that. And I think that kind of tells me that, to me, it was about, or rather my focus at the time was about learning the how to do something, rather than the value of, okay, this person did that thing, and what they did is valuable just by virtue of them putting in the work and creating something, and figuring out the logistics and the steps that need to be taken to execute on that idea, it doesn't matter if you can figure out how they did it. Like, it's not like a magic trick that, like, oh yeah, I know that trick, so it doesn't matter, you know, like as if it's less valuable or something. But I think that part of that started to carry over for me into that feeling of, well, I don't know that magic trick, so I'm a dummy, or I'm missing part of the equation. And I just don't think well, I mean, it still crops up, I'm sure, that kind of feeling, like kind of unconsciously. But I think that the desire to recognize other people's work and appreciate it, and just kind of get back to the core of like why I even got into art and why I like it. That things inspired me, things I thought were beautiful and interesting, or excellent, like well done. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it's unmasked how it was done. I mean, that's partly kind of interesting too. But just the fact that somebody had the guts to go out there and try and do it. And I guess that's kind of, I wouldn't say that's an antidote to it, and I don't know that I have a like great answer that's like, this will solve imposter syndrome or whatever. I think there's a degree of imposter syndrome, like I said, that's just natural. Like, you need to have a map of where you are, and sometimes that means feeling like you're inadequate and you need to learn more, and that's not entirely bad. But it certainly has negative, not necessarily underpinnings, but it has negative implications if you don't respond to it appropriately. Anyway, I was saying something there about the I want to say bravery, or I mean, it's kind of weird to put it that way, but like, who really is going to say, look, I've got a great idea, and I'm going to execute on it, and it's going to be amazing, and everyone's going to love it. It's going to cost a lot. It's going to take a long time. But it's great. Like, that's not really something it's not really an attitude that we appreciate very much. And I mean, I'll be the first to say that, like, I don't really like hearing that stuff. When I hear that, my first thought is like, well, okay, prove it. Like, show, don't tell. If you got something awesome, show us how awesome it is by making it. But that kind of is the first step of making something, is deciding, despite criticism and putting myself out there to the world and putting my art out there to the world as like a valuable offering. This is worthy of your time, worthy of your attention. Then you are kind of putting forward that same kind of attitude. It just, you're not doing it with words, you're doing it with action, with your feet, with your time and your commitment to the craft. And there is some pride, vulnerability, insecurity that goes along with all of that. So how that relates to imposter syndrome. I don't know. I think we're vulnerable. You know, like when we have a craft, and it's this huge map. There's all different ways you could take it, all different things you could learn, all different things little side streets you've never been down. But that doesn't mean you don't know you know, your own neighborhood or where you've been or where you're trying to go. You know. Um, okay, not much of a pep talk, because I don't think that any kind of talk will really change the way people feel about that. But I do think that acknowledging that it exists and kind of exploring perhaps why it is that we feel that way, that might be the first step to having a little more courage, I guess, or faith in your own work and your own process. And this is all coming from a guy who definitely feels that imposter syndrome, and also constantly is feeling like I need to learn that new thing. You know, I see what these people are doing, and that's cool. I want to get in on that, right? And I do have to like assess a bit and say, well, is that really what I need to do? Is that really going to be valuable as an asset or as a tool in my toolbox, or do I just feel like I'm missing out, you know, on what other people are doing and the trend or something? And I think probably more insidious than that for me is the excuses that I make. You know, if I'm not learning something, or again with that feeling of like, oh well, I know, you know, I see what trickery they're up to, and so it doesn't matter that they're able to pull that off because I, you know, have looked behind the curtain or whatever, you know. That attitude is really not particularly helpful. I mean, I do think there are times where things are just trends. They don't have longevity, and I think there is some wisdom in recognizing that and not participating from time to time. But to check myself to actually see, am I just making an excuse? Am I just saying, well, you know, isn't it kind of cool that I went down this path and learned how to draw things by hand rather than rendering everything in 3D? It's like, well, but I don't actually know how to use a renderer in 3D. You know, like to really get the most out of it, I'm a novice, right? So then it's just an excuse, I think, sometimes to make myself feel better. I see a face emerging here. There's like a shadow. Oh boy, I've been ignoring the chat. Let me look. This is an excellent analysis. Why, thank you. Where is the Make Cool button in Photoshop, 3D Studio Max, etc.? It's like all the cool kids know. Why don't I? Yeah. I definitely feel like there are things that people know that I don't know. Or like ways that people have approached things that I have not. I may have talked about this before, but I feel like I flatten things out a lot. That like if I put a scene together, it's like I want to show every angle all at once, kind of like a cubist kind of thing, if you know what I'm talking about. But I see other people's work, and I'm like, I can see what they did, but I'm like, I know that left to my own devices, I wouldn't do it that way. Like in a bad way. Like I wouldn't do it that way because my brain just wouldn't, like those switches wouldn't trigger, you know, neurons wouldn't fire. And it's probably just practice, you know, or coming from a different school of thought. I did a lot of self-learning at first, and I think one of the things that's really tempting is to go into render land too early, and not like really design something out. Because I see that kind of across the board in my work as a temptation, you know, or as a perhaps a I don't want to call it a failing point. It's just like that's where my head has been, or the approach has been, and so that is a natural kind of habit that I fall into. And so when I see like, okay, this person really thought about, for example, the scale of the figures in the scene, you know, that's something that I'm like, okay, I just usually kind of make a scene that I think looks cool, you know, in an abstract way, and then, you know, bring in a character, and, you know, scale kind of, you know, it is in my head, but like, I'm not thinking so much that, well, you know, if I bring the character down this small, then it will increase the perceived scale of the whole scene. You know, like, I feel like by the time I get to that sort of thing, I'm just not even thinking anymore. I'm not designing at that phase. I'm kind of in that render land, you know, like making it all work. Anyway, so that is an example of just personally of like, okay, I see that and I think about that and I go, okay, I could improve in that area. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I don't think that that's a bad thing to recognize that other people approach things, or rather other schools of thought have approached things a different way and thereby get a different result, you know. Ooh. So I've been thinking about the sea tank here lately, and I have not pulled that up to make any changes on it, but it's actually fairly close to what I would consider done. I pulled it in from, so I've been working with the designs in Gravity Sketch first to kind of maintain that gesture, you know, the kind of smoother arcs, and it has more of a drawing kind of feel to it than a kind of more structured 3D approach. And so anyway, I've enjoyed kind of starting my designs there and then bringing them into ZBrush. So the sea tank, it's got like a squid treads and that kind of stuff. I brought that into ZBrush, and I did a pass in there a little while back, but then I ultimately determined that it really needed to kind of return to the design a bit. That I wanted to work out where the moving parts, the joints and all that kind of thing, where they came together, how they worked. So anyway, so I kind of tabled it for a little bit, but we'll be returning to that. It's one of those things. I think we think about these things, and to some degree, I do think we solve problems just with time and patience and rest, even, you know. But I also think that after, you know, sleeping on it or sitting on it for a little bit, you have to kind of get back and hammer it out. So that's kind of where I've been with that one. Feeling like, okay, it's time to get back into Gravity Sketch with that tank and work out those design issues. See, does it even need that there? I like how it kind of fades down. You know, let me break up that shape. I don't want it to be too, I don't want too many shapes and details and so forth, but I want to, I like how it kind of fades down into this other color down here. So we're not using this gray throughout, kind of localizing it. Soften up. I don't know if I want to soften that nose or not. I think I did just like that. Maybe leave a little wedge there. kind of like the eyes being obscured, like you can't even really tell what's going on. This is musings of a madman kind of stuff here. Got all these kind of random things written, and then a face emerging. Just playing with how the neck, the gesture of the neck changes the gesture. Sometimes when I'm just kind of noodling with something, I'll think, what is my knee-jerk, or rather automatic tendency? Like, what do I want to do? Like, if I'm really just conscious of what my habits are. So that would be, okay, maybe I'll draw the shoulders down, and I'll draw in, rings to lay out the shoulder, like this. So then I'll construct the chest this way, and this arm's going back that way, and this arm's going back this way, And anyway, I find that if I do that, I kind of end up with, well, that would be just following your intuition about what you ought to do. But sometimes I'll go, okay, I'm going to just consciously choose to do the opposite. Like, I want to take a darker color in here. So, in fact, I'm just going to make a lighter color. Instead of going with that darker color, I'm going to make a lighter color. And instead of doing a round shoulder, I'm actually going to take the stroke the opposite direction. And you'd be surprised what you kind of come up with if you do that. If I'm saying, okay, I could come this way or this way. What if I say, okay, neither? I'll just go, make a square, coming out this way, And I think it's a fun kind of process to come up with something, to kind of iterate on something based on choosing whether you're going to listen to your intuition or reject it and use your, whatever your intuitive sense was, and go the opposite route just to see where that road goes, right? I don't think you can ever really fully accomplish that. Because at some point your response to your negative response to your intuition is still subject to how you intuit that response. Now we're getting into the meta psychology stuff, but which I know nothing about. Total imposter there. I'm just saying it's kind of impossible to say, well, I'm not going to do what I would do. So in order to not do what I would do, I'm going to do this thing. And that's not what I would have done. It's like, well, it's still what you did. This guy's squinting like, what? What are you talking about? Could you possibly get any more abstract? Said the abstract man. So we talked about imposter syndrome a bit. I'm curious what you guys think in the chat. I can monologue. It doesn't mean it's any good. Or any good to you, any use to you. But if you feel like that's been a thing and it's changed over time, that would be kind of interesting to hear. Well, it used to be a problem, now it's not. Or it never was a problem and now it is. I actually think that that's something I experience. Like, in my youth, having so much more certainty than I do now, Like, oh yeah, that's absolutely, this is the way it is, and then you get a little bit older and you think, well, not in every case and not for everybody and not for, whatever. It's funny because I remember these conversations with a friend of mine very early on in my art career, talking about whether art is subjective or objective, and I was absolutely certain that it's objectively objective. Now I'm not so sure. I should probably mirror this image just to see. It always catches me with eyes. Eyes feel like, oh, that looks right, and then you mirror the image and you go, okay, no, definitely not. All wrong. Hmm. So, in the chat, Instagram alone could convince you you're not good enough sometimes. In the beginning, it's questioning if you were good enough to get your first big break. Then it becomes, are you good enough to keep up with the rest of the team? Yeah, well, the first point for sure. Instagram alone can convince you you're not good enough sometimes. Yes. Um, it's the curse. I mean, I've said this before, but like, how many people used to just play an instrument because they loved it and they wanted to play it, and now it's like you can find some virtuoso, a 5-year-old who can play guitar better than you ever will. And there's this comparison game. That's the other thing I wanted to say. Forgot to say that. So we gotta go. We gotta flip our canvas. And right up here, comparison. I'm not as good as so and so, or blah blah blah. How many times do we say this stuff? Like, well, I've been doing such and such, but I mean, like, I know that you have a lot more experience in that, and a lot of times that's true. But like, why do we always have to give that caveat? Like, I think it was C.S. Lewis who said that to protect our intelligence, or like our perceived intelligence, we act stupid. Like, we pretend, we like downplay ourselves so that people won't see where our actual limits are. And I think he went on to say that, and the shame is that we're so very good at it. That he had a way of being funny about these things. In order to not look stupid, we don't want people to see the limits of our intelligence, so we act stupid as a facade, and we're really good at looking stupid. Interesting. But yeah, it's the comparison thing. So we have to say, well, of course, so and so would do it better, or whatever. Maybe so. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's being humble. But I do think that there are undertones of that end up having nothing to do with humility or acknowledging other people's accomplishments, and just have everything to do with our insecurities. And yes, I think that's most evident in social media, like on the alone side, that you're not. It's not the side that you're putting forward, like. This is the content that I'm posting, but it's the content that you see that makes you feel like you're not doing as good as they are, as cool stuff or whatever. So yeah, it definitely can make you feel that way. In the beginning, it's questioning if you were good enough to get your first big break. Then it becomes, are you good enough to keep up with the rest of the team? And eventually the question is, am I good enough to keep around because there are younger, faster, and more talented folks being added to the team? So I see you said more there, but that actually reminds me of a story. When I worked, I was working, we'll disguise the names, but I was working somewhere, and I was the senior artist on that project, and there were a couple other artists we were working with. Some were seasonal, but there was one in particular that I was starting to get worried that, like, this person does everything I do. They do a good job of it, and they're kind of younger and less experienced, and by extension would be cheaper. And if they can do it faster, then they're cheaper too, right? Because then someone's paying you by the hour to do something, or paying you, if it's by the job and it takes longer, then it costs them just in development time and so forth. So anyway, I started to really think about that. Like, well, am I, is this person really going to carry the team? And, it's, um, and I'm too old for this game, or, whatever it is. And I think there are different feelings that can come out of that. I mean, certainly I think that's where, unfortunately, where teams start to fall apart and there's kind of deceptive stuff going on, is those insecurities. And so I wanted to be careful not to, I don't want to turn this into anything. I just thought, this is a problem that I feel this way. And so anyway, I talked to a friend of mine. He's not even in the same industry. But just kind of letting him know, because that's kind of a universal, uh, younger people, young talent, you feel, whether overshadowed or maybe yeah, someone else has come along and can take your place or whatever. So anyway, I talked to a friend about that, and he was just saying, first of all, that's not what it's about. I know for some people that is, right? But for us, that definitely was not. Life's a whole lot bigger than your job or your status coming from your job. And it's certainly going to be a miserable world if that's how we treat everything. That well, I've got to hold on to this thing. This is the most important thing. It's where I derive my value. And like I said, that's where a lot of those kind of terrible kind of backstabbing things happen in the team and so forth. And I partly bring that up because that's kind of where the story headed, in a way, but with a happy ending. So having had this conversation with him, he mentioned that, and then he said, in my experience, and he mentioned something that in his past work experience, for him, what he decided to do is, for this person who's coming up, I'm just going to make sure that they have everything they need to do their job, and that, not that I want to position myself as like a leader or something, because I know that there's a kind of a interesting psychology to that too. If you feel outshadowed or overshadowed, then you kind of want to put the young buck in their place by being like, well, let me take you along, show you the ropes, even though they're better at it than you. But anyway, his point was, invest in that person. They're part of the team, part of the success of the team and the company, and it's not all about posturing in the group or anything like that, or being overshadowed by this guy. Like, that kind of speaks more to you than it does to him, like you feeling that way. And so just make it your mission to help this guy out, make him successful. So anyway, I took that to heart. I thought, yeah, he's right, and we. It really changed my attitude towards it. Like, instead of having an attitude of concern or worry or whatever, it was like, okay, I know what my relationship with this person is, and how I intend to conduct myself there. So anyway, getting to the whole team dynamics thing. At some point, I was approached by someone senior on the team, and was really given an opportunity to reshape the team, and this person didn't have to be a part of that equation, and so I think if I had gone down that path of worry and well, I could figure out what my value is, that I'm special to the team because of X, Y, or Z. I think that's where my head would have been in that moment of okay, well, this is my chance to solidify my position or whatever. But I think because of that advice and because of that friend of mine, really just kind of giving me the perspective, bringing things back to reality. We just had a totally different approach, So it was like we had a chance to restructure, and the restructure was more centered on all of us learning, having some time to work on parts of our work that were, I want to say tangentially related to the project, like kind of future planning a bit. So rather than just focusing on what's my offering now, and trying to position and jockey for a position there, that was that mentality was shifted. Now I do want to say, like, I understand that that's not necessarily what you're saying. You're saying more of the concern of whether or not you're even needed on the team. And so that really is the same. Where that story ended up, I think, is kind of a whole different point, perhaps. Let me finish reading what you said here. Doubting yourself seems to always be a shadow that follows you in your career. See, I should have just read what you said, and then I could have skipped my whole story and said, yeah, what Manny said. But it's all about having the right mindset to overcome it. And there's wisdom in that C.S. Lewis quote. Yeah. Yeah. I, just saying that, like, kind of bringing that story back to mind, it makes me think about that friend that gave me that advice. He always had kind of an otherworldly way of looking at things, like look, just take a step back and look at this from the big picture. Does this matter? Does this really matter? Is this everything? Is this really, if this is so important to you, then why? I think about, like, Stephen Covey, that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He has that whole kind of funeral exercise where you imagine yourself at your own funeral, and you're listening to what people say, and asking yourself, kind of the exercise there is, would they say the things that I want them to say? Would they say, or would the things that they would honestly say in this moment, would any of that matter? Like, he really knew how to paint the face, like, I'm not saying that I do, but is that something that matters, when it's all said and done? It's like, yeah, that's all mission accomplished. Or is there more to it? Or are there more meaningful things? Like, he really held the position at the company, I do think there is another part of that. I'm not, I'm talking about some of these things in the negative, but I do think there are just fair, honest parts of parts of that feeling. Namely, like, you don't want to let anybody down, right? You don't want to be the person that everyone had to wait for, or that couldn't solve the problem, and had to go on someone else's shoulders to get anywhere. You don't want to be dead weight. You don't want to be difficult. Which, it's funny, like this show that I'm doing, where I'm putting these putting this artwork together. It's going to be in this atrium, kind of like an entryway. It's a kind of a larger atrium, I guess is the right word, but I don't want to say foyer, but it's it's a large space, at the entry of this building for um, music and art. And I I want to put together something cool, something that um, shows what I do, shows what these students could do if they wanted to. Um, but like, honestly, my biggest feeling out of all this is like, just don't be a burden to the people, putting this together. Just figure out what I want to do, put it together, make it happen. You know, I have this temptation, constant temptation, to just be like, well, ask this person to do that, and and I do understand. It's good to be. It's good to know your limits and know when to ask for help and all that kind of sort of thing. But I think if I'm being honest, lately I'm much more, um, perhaps a little too quick to try to find somebody to help solve my problem. I had a friend who talked about this with his. Particularly in his home life, who just like, it's like, I find that I'm constantly asking, hey, could you hand me those keys, or whatever, and it's like, they were 2 feet away. I could have just gotten up and grabbed them, but that laziness, something there, I don't know. I'm reminded of that often enough. So yeah, I do think, part of those feelings are not wanting to be dead weight, wanting to be a valid contributor. Getting too heavy. Getting those clown faces going. Isn't there a clown that has that arrangement? It's got the, I don't know. I'm not into scary movies too much. But regardless, it's too much of that yellow orange in there. I want to be a little more choosy about where I bring that in. Choosy, selective. That's the word. Let's see. What am I even doing? Do we want some of this yellow up in here? Up in here? Up in here? Kind of like this idea of the figure dissolving into either dissolving or merging out of the scene, you know. Maybe it'd be funny if this thing's done and all that's left is Anime Town on it. kind of funny, there's this stream of consciousness kind of drawing idea. I think I can't remember the artist's name, but Stan Procopio from the Proco channel did this interview and talking about just kind of drawing and just allowing the pen to flow and do whatever you feel like. It doesn't have to represent anything or be anything. You're just drawing for the sake of it, And I think that was like a Mobius technique, or exercise rather. And I think it's interesting about that is like what I was talking about earlier is kind of like the opposite of that exercise, where you're trying to be conscious of what you would subconsciously do and then consciously do the opposite. Just to see where abandoning habit would take you, And I guess in digital we have the benefit of undo. All right, I think I need to bring in some fun contrast, color balance, all that stuff. Pump this thing up. Of course, I did like what was going on with the color choices. Granted, having some more time to having some distance from it might change my mind, allowing my eyes to adjust. Well, that wasn't much of a change, was it? Maybe we just do saturation. Let's do curves. We might just go in by channel, so we can bump up the reds. What is this man doing? Lost his mind. Alright, we'll do our overlay, as is our custom. Yeah, what is going on here? Well, our customary overlay layer got a little bit out of hand. We went a little too far tonight, I think. We gotta bring some gray back into this equation. We need to go kind of gray around the eyes so that they have somewhere to go with their saturation. I did kind of like, so obviously I'm pumping these up here, but I did kind of like them being, the eyes being kind of dark. There was something ominous about them just being those dark eyes. And again, maybe that's in that category of like, trendy. Other people are doing it. But I do think it would be kind of interesting here where, this character is like, I think, emerging as like some kind of mythical, otherworldly manifestation of, something. Who knows? Not of this world, we'll say. And so, I think to sell that, having the eyes being the window to the soul, if you're going to be all sappy about it or whatever, there is something true about that. That, like, eyes carry a certain weight in the gesture and the conveying the mind of the subject, right? So having those particularly be, something otherworldly kind of makes sense conceptually. Okay, let's zoom in on those. Maybe make them do something. Who knows? So what did I say? Dark and otherworldly. So we'll leave that like pink-purple there as like the water reflection, kind of like, not a catch light, but the light that gets caught on the very rim of a wet form. And let's try to push this luminosity as much as possible with saturated colors, so the value is related to the hue choice, right? So see, you can see it right here. We're shifting our hue. We're going up and down in value. I think we'll grab this here. Try to expand the eye just a little bit more. Hmm. This, I think, is just too dark in here. I mean, I like these little wing things, but just getting way too much contrast there for what they are. Ooh, goodness. Hmm. 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 Excuse me. Okay, I think we should wrap this thing up here. What is it? What does it need, though? Hmm. What does that even mean? Yeah, it is getting kind of trippy. I kind of like it though. Let's see. See, the trouble is if you simplify things too much, simplifying's good. But once you start going down this path of like craziness, crazy colors everywhere, once you start to rein it in, and you should sometimes, but once you do, the effect can kind of get lost. And so I found that if you maintain those hard edges, you just make a distinct color choice. And it doesn't really necessarily have to make sense. It just has to break up, you know, what you're seeing. Like this here. Do I want to delineate the ear That's what this is, conceptually. An ear from like these little wing, head crest thing. I could just bring in another color. Separate them. But yeah, I think the more you attempt to make it spatially congruent, make sense, spatial sense, the more trouble you get into selling the absurdity of it all. And thus, we created NFT art. I don't like that, the gold. Not sure that I even really like this silly beard thing. Okay. Alright. I'm tempted to do like a color burn or something. And just come in here, see what happens. Start pushing some of these values further. I'll do a new one. If we're gonna do color brown, we gotta do color Dodge. You know we must. Yawn. Let's do another color. Okay, let's wrap this up. So I think we need like a curves, color balance, all that goodness. I think I kind of want to keep everything just about in those mids. Then we'll do color balance. It really doesn't change much. Alright, let's go with color and then we'll just see really what that does. Somewhere in there. And then I think it would behoove us to turn these, probably the purples, back to gray, or maybe even the blue. Behoove us. Behoove us. We'll go channel by channel. Green. Bump it up. Let's grab those blues. Then we'll go into the yellows, which will include the red. Yeah, it's such a strange image. Because you zoom out, you completely lose it. I don't think the color balance is helping, or the curves is helping too much. Alright, we got ourselves a weird one tonight, but I think we're going to end it there. We've got more to do tonight, believe it or not, to get this thing prepped. But that's how it goes. So this was an interesting one, kind of just an exploration of whatever we felt like, and then also kind of thinking about, well, what if I distrust my intuition and just do the opposite of what it says? You come up with some interesting, weird results, right? And that's an exercise, excuse me, that I'll employ sometimes, just for fun, just to see what happens. And yeah, so obviously we came up with something a little bit strange and quite different than what we normally do. So I'm going to end it here for tonight. I guess without further ado, just have an awkward ending and say I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining in, and have a good night.